Morning, everybody. My name is Andy, and I look after the events business here at TALiNT. I'm here with Kirsty and Rebecca from TALiNT, Steph from Lidl, and Chris from Milkround. If you don't know TALiNT well, or you've not been to any of our events before, under normal circumstances, we run around 60 plus knowledge sharing events around the world. Most years we run events in for four key audiences, and the first audience is in-house, obviously, which is this is part of our in-house knowledge sharing program. We run events for agency leaders, recruitment agency leaders, RPO leaders, and also HR tech leaders as well. So we're kind of in a unique position that we curate insight and content from all the kind of different elements or parts of the recruitment community. We run also a benchmarking program. We do this for the agencies and also in-house leaders as well, where talent acquisition teams can look at their different recruitment functions and look at how they're performing, across functions like employer brand or candidate experience. I'm here with my colleague Rebecca, who's just before we start the event is going to tell you a little bit more about that. Rebecca, do you want to have a quick talk about that?
Yeah, thanks, Andy, and good morning, everyone. As Andy says, we've just opened up the 2020 Talent Partners Talent Acquisition Benchmark. And I've recently joined the business to lead that. So I've moved across to TALiNT from in-house resourcing role. So I completely get some of the challenges that you have whilst you're sat in your businesses working through the early careers and the wider talent piece. I just wanted to take a moment to just let you know about the talent program. So the benchmark program, as Andy says, looks at how you perform across 11 different areas of the whole talent acquisition function, one of which is focused on early careers, which is really relevant for today. But again, as Andy said, it covers a whole host of others, such as employer brand, diversity, line manager engagement, amongst others. Taking part in the program, you analyse your performance, so you get to see how you perform, but what is unique is you get to assess that against a named peer group within your industry and also the wider talent participants, so across everyone who takes part. And you also receive a bespoke report that talks about your strengths and areas of development, which is really useful in helping you plan your TA investment. I know a number of your businesses have already registered or are already talking to us, which is fantastic. I just wanted to highlight the programme and we'll follow up after the webinar with some details. But if you'd like to find out more, just contact me or take a look at the website. So thank you. Andy, shall I hand back over to you for the rest of the webinar?
Yeah. So back to the here and now. This morning, well, one day I'd like to think for my sanity, we're going to go back to doing live events, but for now we're online. We've got a growing and a pretty big audience now. So we've got some great speakers to share some knowledge with you today. In the first session, we've got two sessions, one in a couple of minutes, and then the next one at 11:15. The first session, we're going to hear from Steph Ride, who's the emerging talent consultant at Lidl, and Chris May, the strategic team leader at Milkround, who are going to talk through insight from their respective positions in the talent community. They're going to be looking at what Gen Z expects in 2020, what they see as success and how this has changed over the different generations, and aligning kind of aligning this to your organization's strategies, and obviously give you some top tips as well, so you can take some action after this. In the second session at 11:15, just to give you the heads up on that, we'll be hearing from James Gordanifar. He's the head of student recruitment at EY, and also from Michelle Craig, who's the head of marketing at Job Teaser, and they're going to talk about embedding a successful digital recruitment process, and also what universities are looking for right now from and into the future from employers. as well. If you'd like to ask any questions, please click the Q&A. They are anonymous unless you don't want them to be. You can put your name on them, and only the panel, only us guys will see those. They won't be seen by the whole audience. So please ask any questions. What we'll do is we'll do the 2 talks first, and then we'll go to a Q&A, and we'll be able to ask your questions in that part of the event, which should be about 45 minutes to an hour. First though, I'd like to hand over to our first speaker, Steph Ride. Steph, as I say, is the Emerging Talent Consultant at Lidl, which I'm sure you'll agree is, especially at the moment, a very interesting organisation to hear from. And she's going to kick off right now. So over to you, Steph.
Hi, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I did this seamlessly earlier, and now there we go. Cool. Okay. Great. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about emerging talent at Lidl and what that means, and also how we're recruiting, and take you through a little bit about that. As you said, I'm the emerging talent consultant here, so I run all of our grad programs and placement programs and things like that. So I'm going to take you through the why behind emerging talent, why we're doing it, why it's important to us as a business, and then talk a little bit about Generation Z as their future leaders, how we train our graduates, and what challenges we face as a company. So why? I'm sure most of you are in the same boat. We have graduates because we want to recruit and train people who are going to lead our business tomorrow. A lot of people in our business have had a variety of careers within the business, and quite a few of them have started as grads. So we really want to keep that momentum and keep that going. We ultimately aim to have a talent pool for our 3 main areas of the business. So in each region, you have a sales department, a supply chain department, and logistics department. As you can imagine, sales is our biggest area because we have stores all over the country, but they're also supported by supply chain and logistics. So when we build our program, we built something around those 3 departments so that graduates can go into the different areas, see what they're like, get an understanding of our business as a whole before they specialize. The reason we picked this is we wanted to be slightly different in the retail market. Personally, I didn't grow up always thinking I wanted to be working in discount retail. Most people don't. And a lot of times people don't really understand what these different departments do and what a career in these areas looks like. So we want to give people the opportunity to experience all of our business so they can pick what really fits. And that's quite safe for us because it gives us some options with our graduates, but it's also quite safe for the grads as well. Because if they don't love sales, they can go into supply chain and logistics and find a career that works for them. So why this works is, as I said before, our business is really varied. So this is kind of a typical career of someone. So you might start in the grad scheme, become a store manager, run your own store, and then say, actually, I really enjoy training. So you might apply for a regional training consultant role and go into that. And then maybe you do that for a while and think, I want to do projects and I want to work in the sales team and head office. So you move over into that. And then maybe after that, you go and be an area manager. So this is quite typical of different people in our company. So we really want to give people the options of trying out different careers. And the more you know about the business to start with, the better chance you have of doing that. So when we look at recruitment, we've done a few different things with our EVP. So we started with just showing people in the role, which didn't necessarily resonate. We then took the polar opposite approach and just showed people in their personal lives, which we got a lot of feedback asking if we were a fitness company and things like that. That didn't really work. So now we've kind of married the two. So we want to show people in their personal life, but also in their work life as well, so that people can relate to both sides of that and get a feel of who we are as a business. We also want to make sure that we're appealing to Generation Z. So a Deloitte study in 2018 pointed at some of the different things that Generation Z employees are looking for and what shaped them. So some of the big things that have shaped them are the recession. Many people saw their parents lose jobs or get laid off. So they really want security in a role and to feel like they're not going to risk losing their job or anything like that. Wealth gaps, this generation's increasingly aware that there are large wealth gaps, and they want to make sure that they're putting themselves in a good financial position. Housing prices are another thing that people are aware of. It's not necessarily guaranteed that you can now graduate from university and buy a house. So people are kind of thinking about where they're going to live and ultimately if they will be able to buy a house. And then increase in tuition fees are also something people are aware of. They want to be able to pay back any loans that they have and make sure that they're in a secure financial position. So these are some of the things we picked out as a business that we can actually cater to. So as a business, we're quite secure. And I can say that definitely now. Looking around, I feel like in a position of privilege to be able to work for a company that is actually doing quite well at the moment, because no matter what happens in the world, people tend to still want discounted groceries. So people still shop, which is quite good because people know that they're joining a secure company that is going to be there. Lattice career paths, as I talked about before, we can offer people a variety of different roles within our business. And that's something that Generation Z has said that they're really interested in. They want to keep learning and building an arsenal. It's not necessarily direct, like up the ladder progression they're looking for. They want to keep learning as they progress within their career. We also offer various locations. So you don't necessarily have to move to London where house prices are really high. You can apply to live in Newton Aycliffe or Scotland. And maybe that means you can stay closer to home and save some money or buy a house a bit sooner and things like that. And then finally, learning and increasing skills. So we want to make sure that our people are always learning and developing themselves so that they can leave the program in the best stead possible to be really successful in the roles they go into. And this is really important to us as a business because we need to keep justifying to the business that actually this is a viable option for future talent. So we want to make sure that people are leaving these programs so we can say to senior leaders, look, this amazing area manager who's working for you, they were a graduate, so you should continue to invest in these programs. As I mentioned, we have offices all over the country. So we target different universities for each regional distribution center. So we rely quite heavily on our regional recruitment consultants who will partner with local universities. They'll go in and do skill sessions, talks, career fairs, and it lets us build a bit of better relationship with the universities because it's kind of a localized thing. In terms of what we're looking for, we've tried to leave it really vague because we do have quite a few different paths that people can go down. So we've reduced the minimum grade average to 2.2 as opposed to 2.1. People can apply with any degree. We've had graduates come in with biology degrees, all sorts of things, and they do really well because really what we're looking for is work, life, university experience, people who are going out and seeking new opportunities, really in anything, but we want to see that drive and passion because that's what we as a business think is really important. We, of course, judge it against our core competencies. So we're looking at leadership, we're looking at social competencies, business competencies that we use for all of our recruiting. We also want people who are interested in Lidl, who've maybe been to our shops before, perhaps their parents shop there. Quite a lot of graduates when they interview say, oh, I shop at Lidl, the croissants are so cheap. So we want people who at least have a bit of interest and understanding of our business and understanding of our business model and that we're all about efficiency and being lean as opposed to spending millions of pounds to build fancy displays and things like that. So once we get people in the business, we want to make sure that we offer really good training for them. So we've devised kind of a multiple step process. So first of all, they're paired with a regional training consultant. So they would work with that regional training consultant throughout their program. And they have monthly calls and meetings with them to discuss their progress. So what they've been doing, how they see themselves developing with the competencies, and any challenges they faced. And we really want this to be a two-way conversation so they can track their progress. They also have a development diary where they're noting down kind of anything that they've done that they think is really positive. Like today did a interview or something like that, so they can track all their learning. And then finally, for each of the different steps, we have a goal setting discussion and a goal review discussion. So you would start in, say, supply chain, sit down with your line manager and say, this is what I want to achieve. And then they would say, this is what we want to achieve. So that way you're making sure that the graduate knows what they need to focus on, but also the line manager is making sure that they're up to speed and they know what's happening, so that they can also get some value out of that training time as well. On top of that, we have development courses. So people go through all of our manager development courses. They go through all of our basic training courses, and that's quite a few courses by the end of the 2 years. We also have lots of opportunities for self-learning that we send out to people, as well as our national meetings where we talk a lot about personal development, as well as having senior leaders come in to do some inspirational speeches and things like that. So we really want to keep people as engaged in learning as possible throughout the whole process. In terms of challenges, I'm sure you can imagine Lidl isn't necessarily like the sexiest business to work for. So we have to definitely manage people's expectations. People don't necessarily come into our business and work at a desk from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So that can be quite tricky because people will compare themselves to their friends and say, oh, my friend is working at this desk job and it's really nice, but I'm actually doing basic training as a customer assistant and stacking pallets and things like that, because that's necessary to learn before you can progress in the company. And sometimes it takes a while for graduates to kind of understand that and see the value in it. But once they've done it, then they tend to see the value. So it's having those conversations with them from day one, saying there's going to be a change curve, you're going to find this difficult, but ultimately at the end, it's going to be really rewarding. Similarly is that work-life balance piece. So working on the weekends, working odd shifts can be kind of tricky, and it changes throughout the program depending on what department you're in. So we really need to be clear with our graduates saying, this is what you're going to be doing. And this is something that's going to be hard. And we continuously have those conversations so that people kind of understand and can manage and be happy with that. Diversity is something we struggle with. We're trying to look at different strategies in terms of reaching out to different universities. In terms of applications, we don't get a lot of diverse applications. So we're trying to target a few different groups, and we're using a few different companies who work with people from disadvantaged backgrounds to try to get people to assessment centers and to apply. I definitely struggle with regional variations. I'm sure anybody who manages things centrally can kind of understand that. Is we have regions and we want to make sure that we are catering to them and giving them everything that they need, but we also need to make sure that we have a national program that's fairly standardized. So there is some level of flexibility within the regions, but it's making sure that the regional training consultants don't go completely rogue and build their own programs, because then we lose our kind of national identity. And then another challenge can be number of roles. If we have 30 graduates a year and we have 20 of those wanting to go into supply chain, there may not be 20 supply chain roles at the end of it. So we need to make sure that we're monitoring how many people we have in different parts of the company at what time, and making sure that they're securing those permanent positions at the end, which definitely takes a lot of thought and conversations and management, but it's something that we do centrally. So those are our main challenges. And that takes me to the end of my presentation. But as a whole, we're always looking at really where our graduates are going in the company and making sure that they are progressing and really bringing value. And then we're having conversations with those stakeholders in the departments they're going into to tailor the program wherever we need to make sure that it's still meeting the needs of our business, but also meeting the needs of the graduates who are graduating. Perfect. So I will finish up there and pass it back over.
Thank you very much, Steph. Thanks. It's fantastic to get that live kind of case study into what you guys are doing, especially at the moment. So that was really, really insightful. Thank you so much for that. Let's move swiftly on now to a different type of presentation. Chris is going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes now. These guys at Milkround, who I'm sure you all know, have been around for a very long time. They've just done some recent research looking at what grads see as success and how this has changed over different generations. And it's very recent research as well. So I think there's going to be some really interesting top tips here. So Chris, I'm going to hand over to you now to take us through that.
Cool, brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Good morning, everybody. Right, let's get this shared and then we can start. Cool. There we go. Yes. So yeah, as Andy mentioned, it's relatively recent because we came into the new year. Not only was it a new year, it was a new decade. And we're also very conscious that there's also a new generation of candidates now entering the workplace. So we felt it was a really good time to not just be reflective about what's potentially changed and what we can learn about that, but also looking forwards into kind of how we do need to adapt to different generations entering and what we do from there. What we picked up was two quite significant areas, and that's what we're going to cover today. One around kind of the importance and relevance of internships, and the second being how does success look kind of for current graduates and how that compares to previous. So firstly, our research. So this was only February this year, if we can remember that far back in the current time. We surveyed 2,000 kind of students and graduates across all generations to ask them a number of questions about how they first found their employment, how long they stayed, what they saw as the kind of real drivers in terms of what they determined to be a success to them. And hopefully what we can pull from that is some really good kind of tips of what we can share with you of what's been kind of shared by people kind of in a really great way anonymously through this kind of method, really. So the first is the power of internship. And the question that we asked at this stage was, how did your experience leading up to your graduation influence that first step on the career ladder for you? And what we can see here, and this relates to Generation Z, is how did they secure their first job? And as you can see here, 55% of those have told us that their first job was secured as a result of either their initial work experience, either in a placement or internship, or through connections made at that time and doing it from there. I think this is the first point that we can see quite a key kind of generational shift. So for millennials, it came out about 46%. And if we go down to kind of Generation X and baby boomers, it was kind of 38 and 39% respectively. So that's quite a jump that we've seen now, that people, as it seems, are looking to secure their roles a hell of a lot earlier, and we'll show this in a bit as well. But also that previous experience is definitely dictating where a candidate goes on that first step in their career. The next question that we asked was whether you found your work experience vital. And in between everything else that was there was one really significant finding that we got. And this came when we broke it down by which university a candidate attended. So again, in terms of kind of candidates under the age of 26, 83% of those told us that, 83% of candidates that attended a non-Russell Group university told us that they felt their internship was vital in them securing their first job. That compares with just 14% of candidates from Russell Group universities. So it's interesting that Steph just mentioned diversity and social mobility, and I think it's a industry-wide kind of issue where we're looking to kind of make these changes. So I think what's key here is we know that non-Russell Group unis are likely to have potentially more candidates that fit a social mobility background, are definitely more diverse in terms of their backgrounds, and they see these internships as vital, really. So I think the question to ask yourselves at this point is, are your internship programs pre-kind of graduate scheme actually accessible to everyone? Have we got rid of the kind of really old, really kind of bad method of working purely on nepotism and actually having kind of fair processes? We've also done a bit of work on this, and I know we're kind of working for it at the moment, of not just looking at what we consider to be the cost of living, but also the cost of working. So we know some companies do really great things in terms of relocation bonuses or golden handshakes to help people out when they join their graduate schemes. but are you also making your internships as accessible to all candidates and everywhere, especially with this impact? Another survey we've done more recently with current students has asked them about the impact of COVID-19 and the elephant in the room, which hopefully we can sort of move on from. However, 37% of our respondents have told us they've had their internship terminated for this year. This could have drastic implications kind of 3, 4, 5 years down the line, especially from a diversity and social mobility standpoint. If you're not giving the opportunity now, they won't have the opportunity later on in life. And you might see this as you kind of look at your cohort in 5 years' time and go from there. A couple of things that we've heard is some companies have deferred it and looked to do concentrated versions later on in the year during kind of mid-semester breaks or Christmas, and others are using all they can to kind of go virtually. So definitely we would kind of consider that as an option on that. Continuing on the original theme, as we sort of said, what we're seeing is definitely a trend of graduates looking to secure that first role before they leave university. So you can see 60% here of Generation Zs told us that they secured that job before they left. How that compares is it's about 52% of millennials and it was about 40% for Generation X and baby boomers. So I think in terms of how you're looking at attraction programs, if you're not engaging with candidates earlier on in their university career, it's something you definitely need to consider sort of adjusting. So we've got here that in their final year it was 27% versus 17%. And also how these connections are made, it's not always just that experience, but it's what they kind of benefit from that. So it's a third of Generation Z versus less than a quarter of millennials. So already seeing in the early days of a new generation, we're seeing a definite shift from that. Another kind of mention of our COVID-19 survey as well, only 1 in 5 of respondents to that survey told us that they've already got a job kind of secured for next year. So this is about the time that offers would start to be made. And I think there's definitely kind of unrest and concern about what's going on, because even 60% of the candidates that do have a job kind of confirmed are concerned about the impact and what it may have on them starting their profession in kind of September onwards this year. So that takes us away from the internships. And the next is us asking a range of generations about what they considered kind of success and progression. It's interesting what some of Steph said. I don't know if she's either stolen my thunder or whether she's actually kind of reinforcing what we kind of had as part of our survey from there. So we asked them a range of different questions around what success looked like. And as you can see here, 31% of Generation Z have told us that learning new skills is what they consider to be their number one area of progression. If we compare that all the way back, quite a wide generational gap to baby boomers, it's 15%. So that's more than double of the new generation see these new skills as their way of making progress in the world. Number 2, and I think, again, it was mentioned previously, but salary is always going to be a concern about what kind of comes out. The difference between generations actually doesn't differ tremendously. But if I told you that salary generally is the number one at kind of 15, 18, 21 and 17% respectively through the generations, it shows it doesn't deviate massively. This new skills definitely seems to be a trend that is growing and continuing. So if we compare to millennials, 18% said salary and 21% said skills from millennials. So the gap was there, but it's just widening at this stage from that. So if number 1 is new skills, just to complete the top 5 for you. So yeah, that was 31%. The highest salary was 15. And then the others, kind of the responsibility, taking on a management role and having a better job title, were only kind of 10, 10 and 9% respectively. And again, if we compare through the generations, there's no more than a kind of 2 to 3% variation. So it just shows how vital this area of looking at new skills for candidates is so important to their development and what they want from you as employers and doing that. So I guess the next bit is looking at what would be the impact if you're not providing this to your graduates. Like Steph said at Lidl, it's that opportunity to go into different roles to see the wider business. Well, we asked candidates across the different generations, but most importantly for Generation Z, how long they plan to stay in their first role. And quite a scary 84% told us that they consider less than 2 years for that first role after graduation. How this compares across the generations, that's 16% that look like they're going to stay for longer, 29% of millennials said that they would stay for more than 2 years, compared to 51% for Generation X, and unsurprisingly, 63% of baby boomers stayed in that first role for more than 2 years. So again, there's definitely a trend there, and it's changing, and if we're not adapting accordingly, we need to make sure. What we did ask at this stage as well was the reason for them considering and looking at new roles, and 29% unsurprisingly said the pursuit of new skills. I think, again, as Steph mentioned, changing that assessing, so people can come from any background now, people can generally have any degree, and a lot of the assessing is based on their skills. So if we're doing skills-based assessments, are we also then harnessing that and building our graduate programs around it as well? So I guess the growth of rotational opportunities and experiencing a lot more could help kind of take this away. Very small little caveat to this though. I was speaking recently to someone from a major bank, and she was telling me that actually within their business, they encourage graduates leaving within kind of 2 to 3 years of starting, which sounds quite crazy when you do all this work to do attraction. But what they've invested quite heavily in is their alumni program and then a returner program later on. So they're almost encouraging people to go and gain new experience and new skills and bring that back to the business that they started their careers. And the impacts that can have for them as a business could be much more sizable than constantly trying to develop people in-house from there. Quite brave, but definitely something to consider from that. So I guess almost in closing is just some top tips that we can pull out of this. So the first is just communicate, make it very clear what the development options are, and let them demonstrate that they can make progression without having to leave your business. You do have these opportunities and you can make them part of your business long term. Let them have some input. Let them tell you what they want. Naturally, as long as it's realistic and it's something you can develop, it's something you can definitely bring into your programs and what you can do. Allow them to develop and learn new skills. It was a large part of what Steph just spoke about Lidl are doing at the moment. And it's definitely something we'd encourage. Something that we picked up is don't wait for someone to be a manager before they get training and such. Train them in the skills of management before that promotion, not afterwards. And it gives people an idea of that track that they're on and the progression that can be made. Number 4 is something we've always promoted for a number of years, is case studies. The second someone can visualize it, they can put themselves in the shoes of somebody that's followed the path, has developed and is demonstrating that success. They can visualize that a hell of a lot better than any of us kind of telling them what that opportunity is and what it can be. And finally, something that we've kind of put as job swap initiatives. So similar, seeing different parts of the business for a period of time, whether that's through a rotational, whether it's through secondments or something like that, it really gives people a different learning and different kind of outlooks on what's happening and what they can do. So just in closing, some other key findings that we thought we'd share. And just to kind of close on this, so 68% of Generation Z secured their role, well, told us that they wouldn't have secured their role without their internship in the first place, compared to less than half of baby boomers. We're all adopting flexible working at the moment, kind of not by choice necessarily, but 1 in 5 of Generation Z are looking for that anyway. That compares with only 5% of baby boomers. A huge 84% of Generation Z expect to stay in that first job for less than 2 years. So how can we change that perception? How do we adapt our programs to take that into account in the knowledge that that's the behaviour that we expect people to display? 83% of non-Russell Group graduates under 26 saw their internship as absolutely vital to their first role. So with a changing landscape at the moment and it being much more difficult to deliver, we need to see how we can adapt to ensure that we don't leave gaps in our kind of cohorts for years to come. 31% of Gen Z consider learning new skills as that biggest sign. So that's double the amount of baby boomers and a gap that we just see increasing by each generation over the years. And finally, 29% would leave a new role to go and develop new skills. So is that something that you can offer in-house that you've just not yet provided? So yeah, that's that in closing. Thank you. And I guess over to any questions. Let's go back there.
Thank you, Chris. That was insightful. Thanks, and it's good to get some real kind of recent research as well to get a bit of a finger on the pulse there. So thanks very much for that. And we have had a few questions come through. The first one for you, Steph, really, is how many applicants do you receive for your graduates program, and kind of, can you just take us through the kind of selection process with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year for our 2020 intake, we received about 5,000 applications across the country for around 30 roles. So that equates to about 380 applications per region, but it definitely varies per region. London regions are more popular than some other regions, so it definitely varies. In terms of the application process, so we normally start it in, our applications close around Christmas time, and then we do the selection in January. So we've already recruited for our intake that'll start in September. But what that entails are online applications. So candidates go online and apply. They then do some online tests, so some reasoning tests and kind of like a little fit test is what we call it. And then anyone who passes those online tests would then be, their applications are sent to our regional recruiters. They sift through and they can send out 100 video interview application, or yeah, 100 video interview requests. And then the video interviews are sent back. So the candidate would record them. They then come through our system, and then the regional recruiter normally sits down with our regional training consultants and the senior team and reviews those video interviews. And then they invite normally about 15 people to an assessment center. And off the back of the assessment center, we would then offer the roles.
Okay. Oh, interesting. And how do you kind of measure the success of your programs?
Yeah, so I look year on year in terms of what roles people are going into, what level they're going into in our company, as well as kind of what they do in the future. So we want to keep people to the end of the future, ideally, to permanent roles. So we're tracking that as well. And we're tracking their departments. And then we're also getting feedback from the regions on how well the programs are working for them so that we can tailor them and make them work as best as possible. We've changed them quite a bit in the past few years, just in terms of small little things and who runs them and where they sit in the structure. So yeah, we're constantly measuring that.
Oh, okay. And sorry, I missed what you said about what's the kind of balance between kind of London and the regions?
So we have 2 regions in London, so Enfield and Belvedere, and they probably get 100 more applications per region than the other regions. So the maths in my head are not working out right now, but they tend to be quite busy. But they're quite good because they partner with the neighboring regions. The North Slate doesn't tend to get as many applicants, so if they don't have that many, they will go into the London regions and look at some of their applications as well, so we can kind of share across regions. Yeah.
And kind of how do you kind of envisage this changing, well, kind of in the near future and beyond, obviously, given the kind of situation or what we're kind of going through now?
Absolutely. So in terms of COVID and how we're dealing with that, really, we're kind of business as usual with the graduates, which seems really strange, but a lot of them are working in essential roles. So they're in stores, they're in logistics, they're in supply chain. We're still anticipating our 2020 intake to come in September. Whether we do the welcome event virtually or not, we'll figure that all out. But we're kind of planning business as normal. We've had to delay some rotations just to make sure people get good training, but we've been pretty flexible with that. And then in general with the programs, we're currently doing kind of an education piece for ourselves and speaking to our heads of administration out in the regions to see what they think and where there's a lot of value. We've done a lot of work in terms of saying people are going to go into store manager roles at the end, but we need to figure out if that's still viable or if we need to pitch it at different levels.
Okay, no, that's interesting. And Chris, I mean, it might be interesting to get your perspective on this. And obviously, I don't expect you to know kind of stats or anything, but given obviously everything that's going on, how are you guys finding it at Milkround with the applications? I mean, is it heavily weighted London, or are you seeing more kind of in the like regionally? You know, given kind of what's going on, and I guess less people maybe are looking into London.
I don't think we've seen any shift regionally yet, or it's definitely something we've at such. What we're definitely aware of is there's less role in advertised at the moment, but actually, I'm guessing we've all got a bit more time in our days than we had previously without commuting or studying. So we have seen an increase in terms of actual traffic to the site and the number of applications being made. So we've seen some clients kind of looking at it, whether they're recruiting or not, kind of looking at it as a talent pooling opportunity now and doing that. It's always been slightly more difficult for graduates to predict behaviour in terms of regionality, because we've got kind of 2/3 of our database say that they're willing to relocate, and how that compares to probably experienced hire is drastically different. So we all know that you can be at uni or your family can be somewhere else, and London and the South East has always been a pool, and it's not a surprise when someone says otherwise. I think over the time we have seen the Northwest and the Midlands increase, but there's not been a massive shift in terms of people saying that London and the South East isn't attractive anymore. It still is.
No, fair enough. In terms of obviously just thinking about that and the kind of uncertainty that surrounds grads and early careers at the moment, what's, from your point of view, what would your suggestions be to kind of employers and to people in STEM, really?
No, it's fine. It sounds like that's going in the right direction in terms of it anyway. That I think the big concern, I've got to say that, haven't I? I think there has been a shift anyway the last few years away from, and definitely now there is that uncertainty of, well, actually, are they going to graduate, and in terms of what grade are they going to get, especially kind of degrees that are very much based on that final exam and what happens. There is that uncertainty, but I guess there is a reality that that candidate has still done 2, possibly 3 2/3 of their kind of 3 years at university. They're not going to be different just because of that final 2 or 3 months. So I think any company that's invested well in skills-based assessing and doing that will still be identifying the best candidates and how they develop them into their careers and do it. Academics is slightly in doubt somewhere. It shouldn't really have a drastic impact on that candidate if you're assessing them correctly.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And how does that kind of sit with you, Steph? I mean, kind of staying with the current market and expectations of grads, are you kind of making any massive changes right now?
No. So I think what Chris said is very accurate.
Good to hear.
I mean, yeah, we went through our recruitment process in January, and we're really confident about the people we brought in. So we still want them to join our business, no matter what the end of their final year looks like. So we're in the process of drafting it, but we're going to send out some information to all our grads to say, listen, like, we will work with you on an individual basis, depending on what your university is doing. If you want to delay your start, fine. Like, we'll work with you because we think that you will be a valuable asset to our business. So we're just kind of being flexible with it, because ultimately we still want them to join us. Yeah.
No, fantastic. It's good to hear. We've got another question about internships. Do you guys use internships, did you say, Steph? Or
No. So we do placement programs at the moment, but we don't run internships.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Because Chris, you mentioned that 37? I did write it down. They'd had their internships terminated. What kind of, from where you're sitting, would you recommend to kind of employers about this, or what's the feedback from your side?
Yeah, I guess not everyone, do we say lucky or not, I don't know, that can be business as usual like Lidl at the moment and doing that. Yeah. So companies just really don't have that infrastructure.
Yeah.
I guess the message that we'd kind of put out is, no matter how tricky it is, the number one is communication, as it always has been. So it was like, even the people that have jobs secured have said, like, I think it was 60% of them have said they're still concerned about the job. And so no matter how many times you can tell people at the moment, don't worry, it's fine. And I'm sure we've all had communications from our own businesses saying, it's fine, it's not a problem, you're valued, you're this. I mean, imagine that, but you haven't even walked into an office yet.
Yeah.
With our business, we're still doing some onboarding. It's just, we're all changing like we all did 4 weeks ago and had to do that. We do understand for some people it is almost impossible to run an internship if you had a structure, and actually maybe some businesses are actually in more crisis at the moment, or staff are being, so there's just literally not the people to run it. I think in terms of that communication, and as we mentioned, what we've heard is some people offering a kind of condensed version later on, or some have offered kind of a project that doesn't require them to attend an office or check in, but maybe something where they have a mentor that can spend some time, and they devise a project that they can work on over the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks perhaps, and submit, and it gives them some insight to their business whilst not being able to kind of physically offer them come into an office for 2 months and then return to from there. It doesn't really happen. But what we did see, and it could be interesting for Lidl in terms of that, of there is a big area of kind of diverse and more socially mobile candidates, seeing how vital that internship, that touch point with an employer before they graduate, appears more vital than it is for the candidates that have climbed to attend the Russell Group universities. So there's definitely something there that if you are struggling with diversity, you need to look at your touch points much earlier in the recruitment program than you currently are at the moment.
Okay, that's good advice.
Steph, could I just ask you a question? Thinking about, you were talking about the regional relationships that you have, and I get all the challenges around London and why you'd get a huge volume of applicants, particularly in that location. But I'm quite interested, do you have any strong regional relationships outside of London, and have you got any tips for how businesses can build those relationships?
Yeah, I would say our regions, the strength of them depends on how strong our regional training consultants are. So we have some really strong regional training consultants in like Wednesbury, for example, so out near Birmingham. Newton Aycliffe is really strong. Our Scotland region is really strong. And those are the regions that are really bought into the program. So they've been doing them forever, since before I've been doing this, and they know that they work, and they know that they can use those people to become their next like area managers or team managers. I actually think sometimes it's easier for us outside of London because our stores might not be so crazy. I think running a store in central London where you have insane turnover is probably really hard to do as a grad right out of university. Whereas if you're starting in a bit of a quieter store, you have a bit more time to learn. It's not as hectic. You don't have all the crazy things happening. So I think that's a little bit easier. But yeah, I would say having relationships with those individual regions, understanding what their needs are and how they want to use the program is really important, because if they're bought into your vision and they feel like you understand what they need, then they're going to be more willing to really devote time to it in order to get the best out of the program.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Just before we wrap up, we've got one more question actually. It's about university placement students. So students who obviously do a year out from university. I'll go to you, Chris, for this one. Firstly, are employers prepared from it, and are universities prepared for the fact that they can't offer students now placement years for this year? So this is kind of, I guess, directly related to kind of the situation right now. So
candidates that were going to be away from uni for a year and then returning a year later, not having that opportunity now. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I haven't actually heard anything about at the moment, actually. So it's definitely something, I don't know who's raised it, but we could definitely go and kind of investigate and see if we know of any examples of this. There's nothing I'm aware of. No, it's not something impact. No, and it's definitely an interesting one. We've not considered, you can't condense it, you can't change it. You either would doing it for a year or you're not. It's still too soon to say whether a September start for something like that is available or not. No, definitely look into it. Yeah, no, interesting one. Do you guys at Lidl, do you take placement students as well? Like they do a year out and then they go back?
So we've hired ours for this year. But again, I'm kind of worried about the opposite. The university is saying, actually, you're not going out. So again, I'm kind of monitoring on an individual basis, but we're still planning to go ahead with it. So.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. Okay, I think we've kind of gone through most of the questions there, unless anyone else has anything to add. Just obviously, you talked a lot about your research, Chris. Just to kind of wind up, we obviously would love to share with the audience where we can get hold of the actual research, because I think it sounds quite useful. So, if will you be able to do that after this, or?
Yeah, I'll double check where it is, but
we can get the kind of link
with people, or if people want to get in touch, definitely we can share. And I mean, a lot of it is pulling out some data. We've got all of the kind of raw data. If anyone's got something specific, we can definitely interrogate that and see what comes out.
Yeah,
specific question from there, definitely.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I think that just about rounds it up. Just thank you very much, Steph from Lidl. Thank you so much for taking us through that case study. I know you're probably massively busy at the moment with everything going on, so really appreciate your time on that. It was really, really illuminating to hear what you guys are actually doing. And thanks, Chris, for taking us through your research and providing some tips as well from where you guys are sitting in the industry. And thanks to our audience as well. We've had some good questions there. We've got a really good engaged audience. So thank you for spending the time. We're going to take a break now for say 20 minutes and come back online, minus Chris and Steph, sorry to say, but we'll be back online with our next portion of the Emerging Talent event at 11:15. So thank you very much.